10 out of 12 shows less frequency of reoffending for the restorative justice group. The ones that failed were both in Australia, the juvenile property experiment, and also the drinking and driving experiment, where we had no identified victim. And it seems as though a victim's presence is an extremely important factor in generating the kind of emotional power that seems to bring about the change in subsequent behaviour by offenders. And so here you have again this line graph demonstrating those numbers. So the third question, what effect does face-to-face restorative justice have on frequency of reconviction in violent crimes, where we're looking at youth and adult experiments combined, and with all levels of seriousness in these cases? And the answer is that all of our 5 tests of restorative justice with violence showed less crime for the IJ group. But you can see it's highly variable. The 8% reduction was our London robbery experiment. The 55% at the end was the probation experiment. So a wide range of outcomes, but all in the direction of restorative justice being effective. What effect does restorative justice have on frequency of reconviction on property crime offenders? And we find that 3 out of 4 of the tests showed less crime for the restorative justice group. And this is why we think we can say that restorative justice works better for more serious crime. So here again, once more, this very bad result in Canberra for the property experiment, but the others all moving in the direction of restorative justice. What effect does face-to-face restorative justice have on youth crime? And the answer for us was that 3 out of 4 of our tests showed less crime for the restorative justice group. And what effect does restorative justice have on adult crime across both property and violent crime? And the answer is that all 6 of these tests with adults showed less crime for restorative justice. And here you can see these numbers again. And finally, what is the effect of restorative justice on the prevalence and frequency of any reconviction over 2 years? And by prevalence, I mean the percentage of offenders with 1 or more convictions or arrest. And the answer is that 16%, there was a 16% reduction in prevalence across all tests for the restorative justice group relative to the conventional justice group, which is on the border of statistical significance, which is to say that there is a small possibility that this is a chance result, but because it's so close to being statistically significant, we believe it's quite reliable. In terms of frequency of reoffending, that is to say, not just saying whether people reoffended or didn't reoffend, but looking at the number of offences they subsequently committed in the 2 groups, we found that there was a 27% reduction in the justice group across all of these tests, and that was statistical. And this is simply a kind of summary table of all of these experiments. And you can see on the right-hand side here, the vertical line is the point at which there is an issue in relation to statistical significance. If the confidence interval, which is the horizontal line for each of these tests, crosses the central line, it means that the result is not statistically significant. And you can see that in almost all cases, we did not achieve statistical significance in the tests one by one. Usually, in fact, I'd say always, because we were never able to get enough cases in the time we had available to get to that level. But the important thing to look at is the overall pattern, and you can see that with the exception of those two experiments in Canberra, the juvenile property experiment and the drinking and driving experiment, in all cases the center point is on the restorative justice side of the central line, and there is a very clear result across all 11 tests that shows that the overall pattern is statistically significant in favor of restorative justice. So I'd just like to briefly mention the victim benefits, which are substantial and which I could talk about endlessly, because that is the focus of my own research. But in summary, I would say that we have found that restorative justice provides significantly higher victim satisfaction than court justice does, and there are many reasons for that that I won't go into now. But one of the most important benefits of restorative justice relates to the opportunity that it provides for apologies to be transacted in that setting, and which is so difficult to achieve in a court setting. There's also a significant greater reduction in the desire for revenge by victims, and I think that this has probably been widely underrated by the criminal justice system in general, that victims often feel so aggrieved about what's happened to them that they have, in fact, in many cases, set about achieving their own vengeance for the harm that they've suffered. And that an offence against one party can result in future crime simply following on from those events. There's also, we found, a significantly greater reduction in post-traumatic stress symptoms that victims experience as measured by standard psychological tests. We found that for our robbery and burglary victims, their PTSS, their symptoms of stress, are reduced by around 40% relative to those who didn't get restorative justice. And here you can see that when you take it apart,